Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Vazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. You guys, I have someone that I've been following for a really long time, and I'm so excited to finally have her on this show. Welcome, Dr. Natalia Grindler. Thank you for being here today. You know, I love, the way you just talk about being one with nature and your practice and fertility. And I just I go to your page and I'm like, I just feel so relaxed and good about the things that we're doing as doctors. So I really appreciate you coming on so that we can dive into fertility from your amazing perspective so others can learn from you as well. And before that, I just want to kind of talk to our listeners about you. You are double board certified in OBGYN and reproductive endocrinology and infertility. You use evidence-based medicine to enhance your fertility or your patient's fertility naturally with diet and lifestyle recommendations. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. You're also a mom to 3 boys, and outdoor adventures are something that we see you talking about a lot, and they obviously keep you grounded. And you live in Denver, Colorado, and you practice with Conception's Reproductive Associates of Colorado. Welcome.
Thank you.
So let's talk about fertility myths. And then we're going to talk about toxins, nutrition, positivity, all the things that you know so much about, and we're going to learn from you about this. So, you do, as a fellow myth buster, you bust myths every Monday, and I know you talk a lot about birth control pills, unexplained infertility, and age. Which myths do you hear the most often in your office?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's so much shame and stigma in our fields of infertility and pregnancy loss. And I think that in general, as women, we can tend to internalize medical problems and blame ourselves. Because somehow if we blame ourselves, we think we can control the outcome. If only I hadn't gone for a walk after embryo transfer, then maybe I would have gotten pregnant. Or I caused my pregnancy loss because I had a cup of tea. It's just not true. And so, the most common ones I hear is that I'm not actually trying to conceive until I'm tracking my cycle or using an app. That's not true. If you're not using contraception and are sexually active, then you're trying to conceive, even if you don't realize you are yet. Another one is that I like to bust is that everyone in my family has had no difficulty getting pregnant, so I shouldn't either. And I think that's particularly true where women try and reassure me. No, my mom had me at 42, so it should be okay for me now too. But your mom's 42 is very different than our 42. Think of just how different our lives are. And that matters. And then another one that I talk about probably every day is no one in my family has health problems, so I shouldn't need genetic carrier screening. Where, I'm not trying to one-up you. I really am just giving you all the information you need to decide what's the best way for you to have a family. And if we're doing testing, why not have more information?
Yeah, and I would agree with you on all of those, 100%. And other than checking out your feed, how do you tell your patients what they can do to discern between fact or fiction with the stuff that they've read about?
It's hard. And I think it's one of the things I love about social media is that there's so much out there, right? So there's so much information out there, and people are creating a dialogue about infertility, whereas previously it was so isolating. But it's hard when you're not a physician to know who you can trust and who you can't. So I personally think it's helpful when patients come to visit with me with a list of questions or concerns. Sometimes just the process of writing them down and taking a moment to intentionally think about it, patients are like, this doesn't make sense. This sounds crazy. But when in doubt, talk to your REI.
I agree. Don't Google it. Just talk to us. We're faster than any Google search, YouTube's, you name it. We can give you the answer a lot quicker, and it'll be better than anything that you're going to read online for sure.
But I'll be the first to admit that I totally get the Googling idea because, with my third kiddo, I went down a Google rabbit hole. So even though I am trained as an OBGYN and an REI, I, at 2 a.m., was Googling how to go into labor because I was so convinced that there was something I missed in my medical training and that Google would have the answer. And it didn't. So just email your REI.
And then I want to talk about toxins, and I've learned so much from you about them and their impact on our bodies. And it's been getting a lot of attention recently, and for good reason. So can you tell us a little bit about how limiting toxin exposure could perhaps improve your success with fertility treatment, or can it?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So, I think I just want to take a step back. So, when we talk about toxins, it's the ones that I'm referring to are specifically chemicals in our environment that we're all exposed to that can interfere with how our hormones work, or what are called endocrine disrupting chemicals. And I focus the majority of my academic career on researching how these chemicals in our environment impact our reproductive health. And the truth was really frightening. There are so many chemicals that we're exposed to that can impact our hormones. And so, whether it's chemicals in plastics called phthalates being associated with earlier menopause, or worse outcomes in the IVF lab, or lower numbers of eggs, all these things have been associated with chemicals. So I think is absolutely something that we have the potential to control for our outcomes.
And how do you inform your patients about that? Is this something that you bring up like at your new patient consultation and say, I want to talk to you about environmental toxins and see what you can do to reduce your exposure?
Yeah, so I try and talk to all my new patients about it. But I've realized that not everyone is receptive to it and not everyone's interested in it, right? So I tell them, if this is something you want to talk more about, let's talk about it. If not, you can just check me out on my Instagram page, because sometimes it's so overwhelming just getting in the door of a fertility doctor that you don't want to overwhelm them with information, which is kind of what we're doing one way or the other anyways.
Have you met, I should introduce you if you don't know her, Dr. Jenna Hua from Million Marker?
No.
You've heard of her, so she's great. She has a urine test, and you basically journal all the things that you are exposed to during the day, and then she'll measure, all the endocrine disruptors that she can detect. And then she'll then give you feedback as to what you're exposed to and what you should change. And then you can do the test again to see if your exposure has also changed. So it's a pretty cool test. I have to introduce you guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how do you advise patients? Like, can you give us just a quick, checklist of things for people who are listening who aren't necessarily going to come see us? What are the things that you suggest that they do?
The first thing I always tell patients is to really think about what their food is coming into contact with. So start in your kitchen. Any food that you store should really be stored. You want to avoid storing it in plastic containers or heating food up in plastic containers. So as much as possible, use glass containers, or, instead of drinking out of plastic water bottles, drink out of glass water bottles. So that's typically something that is really tangible and easy to start with, that most people start with. And then once you do that, what I challenge patients to do is every time you're buying something new for the house, whether it's a cleaning product or you ran out of lotion and you need a new lotion, try and find the healthiest alternative. Because I don't want you to just go raiding through the house and throw everything out. That's so overwhelming, and you'll go down a dark rabbit hole like I have done in the past. And no, it's just not possible, right? Like, it's just too much. And so in general, I just say anytime you're going to Target, find the healthiest lotion, or find, the things that don't have fragrance added to them. So those are kind of a good place to start off with.
Yeah, I remember a patient, this was years ago, and I didn't realize how what she said would always stick with me until now, but she said that she was allergic, in the allergy section in her patient questionnaire, she said she was allergic to paper. And it's the BPA, it was the receipt paper, because I was like, who is allergic to paper? And now I know that she knew about environmental exposure to BPA and how it's in receipt paper. And so that's always stuck to me. So I never touch the receipt paper.
Good.
So one of the most common questions I know we both get, especially after an embryo transfer, is what should I eat? Is there anything I can do diet-wise that will improve my chances? And I certainly tell my patients I want them to aim to be the best shape of their lives when going through fertility treatment. What do you feel is the best advice for patients when they're trying to conceive and trying to get pregnant here with or without fertility treatment?
Yeah, we're very similar in our approach. I encourage women to be the healthiest they can be. And so specifically, I just say, now is the time. If you want to clean up your diet, now is the time to do that. So in general, I recommend doing just avoiding processed foods. So eating more fruits and vegetables, less meat. Make sure that you know all the ingredients of what you're putting into your body. And then there's pretty good data to suggest, particularly around the time of embryo transfer or IVF cycles, avoiding any sweetened beverages.
I kind of do like a Diet Coke here and there, but I could do without it if that's what my doctor tells me. Yeah, I have patients. I drink Dr. Pepper or Mountain Dew, and I'm like, oh, definitely avoid that.
Yeah.
And then what about losing weight? I mean, it is such a sensitive topic for so many people, and I feel sometimes when I bring it up, I feel bad, like I'm going to hurt someone's feelings. And, obviously, if you can't tell, I'm a very sensitive person. So how do you approach the topic of weight and the ideal weight for your patients, either going through a retrieval or a transfer?
Yeah, so I'm also a really sensitive person, and it was something that I had to learn how to talk about with patients. But what I can tell you is that your weight is a fact, right? It is a neutral fact. And so I can say, you know, you are overweight based on your body mass index, your BMI. We know that your risk of, if you, I always tell people, I can't change your age, but your weight is something that you can potentially change. And so by framing it that way, as this is something that we can potentially change to dramatically improve your chances of fertility treatment working and decreasing your chances of having any kind of adverse obstetrical outcomes.
And I love how you just use that term neutral fact. And that's something that I've learned about you. And I think that's part of how you can use language to think about things in a positive way and not a negative way, because neutral sounds very peaceful. I like neutral. I was curious, how did you learn to use that language around medicine and medical terms? Because that's not something that I was exposed to. So what is there a story behind that?
Definitely. So I have been doing a lot of growth and development over the past year. And so in particular, one of the things that has really helped me is our life coaches. So I started by listening to podcasts that talk about really how we can change our outcomes. We always, as women, so I think in general, as women, we tend to assign emotional thoughts to everything. And what I had to learn about myself is that those thoughts dictate our feelings, and then those feelings will dictate our actions, which lead to results. And that's what I learned through a life coach. And so the truth is, we have so much more control over our thoughts and our results than we realize. So a great example is, it doesn't happen often, but when we do have patients that are failed follow-ups because our treatments don't work, you have the option to decide, I'm dreading this consult. I feel like a failure. I didn't do a good enough job as a physician. Or you can see it as this is an opportunity for us to really take a deep dive into her medical history, all the other tests that are available right now to help empower them to make the best decision for their family moving forward. And once I realized that we have that choice, I was like, oh, I don't have to be bummed out if I have to have hard discussions with patients sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I used to go through lots of cupcakes and chocolate boxes in preparation for those calls, but there's definitely a way to change your outlook about those conversations and to turn them into learning experiences. And it sounds like you've definitely done that. And how have you seen your positivity help your patients?
Yeah, so I think it's important to, whenever possible, really go back to the research, right? So there are research studies that show that couples that walk in to transfer day with some swagger, that they're like, oh, I know this is going to work, they have higher pregnancy rates. And so if you're not feeling confident about your transfer, then why are we doing this? What do you have to lose by trying out positivity? And so I think part of it is that our patients, by the time they even get to us, they've been through so much, and they come with these battle wounds that they're protecting. And they almost don't want to let themselves believe in the happiness and successes possible because they've been disappointed so many times before. And so I really try and reframe that. We've figured out why things aren't working. this is the fun part. This is where you get to believe that you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, one of my coaches, there's a mantra: if you believe it, you can achieve it. And of course, with fertility treatment, it is not that easy, right? But I tell my patients, like, hope never killed anybody, you know? There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with being excited right now in this moment, especially when we give patients good news, like they're pregnant. It's very natural and normal for our patients to think, like, what else is going to go? Like, they can't believe the information we're giving them. They're so afraid to be happy. So I do relate to a lot of what you're saying, and I appreciate it so much. Recently, as I saw from your social media, that you took a break for a while and you came back very refreshed, invigorated, and I just love everything that you're doing and saying. Share with us, what did you learn during that time?
Yeah, I had a major life change that impacted my family and their health. And I needed to be authentic and take the time to focus on us healing. So I needed to reset my intentions for my use of social media. And part of it is I just needed to be completely away from social media for a while. And that I learned once I kind of did the work that we had talked about, I learned that we get to choose how we want to live our lives, spend our energy, and dedicate the use of our time. And so we don't have to do anything. And once I changed the framework of I don't have to do social media, I'm choosing to do social media because I have exciting things I want to share. It was really the mindset that I needed to change to have my voice back again.
Well, I'm glad your voice is back because it's stronger than ever. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers?
So for anyone going through a hard time, I want to encourage you to stay true to yourself and what you need. You'll get through this, I promise.
So where can people find you and your work?
So on Instagram, I'm Natalia Grindler _MD, and I work at Conception's Reproductive Associates in Colorado.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Natalia. I hope you'll come back and join us again for another deep dive into fertility. And I think we should just have a series, deep dive with Dr. Natalia Grindler. We'll do it often. Promise?
I would love that. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Abazadeh.
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.